as you sit here in this moment and breathe, let yourself slow way down. Slow way down so that you're not racing forwards or pulling back. You're just stopped. The present moment exists outside of time. To arrive here, you have to let go of time. There are two major forces in this world. One is the energy that makes everything happen, an abundant reality that offers you limitless possibilities. And then the other force is a conscious system of limitations. That keep an entire world of beings stuck in the same narrow circles of eternity. Infinite, omniscient power and possibility. And then this force that just curtails your vision of it and keeps you confused. If you didn't have that force, there'd be nowhere to go. You would just be the infinite power. But this force exists, this limiting force. This limiting force creates your personality, creates your culture, creates the lens through which everybody views everything. All the places you think you can't go are just a product of this limiting force. It's been described in many different ways. Sometimes it's described in nefarious ways. In shamanism, it's often described as a parasite, because there are aspects of how you use your mind because of this force that are parasitic in nature. But that's an oversimplification. It's not bad or good. It's just a structuring of things. A structuring where there otherwise is no structure. It creates boundaries for you to surpass. Without those boundaries to surpass, there'd be no sense of growth. There would just be this vast, unchanging view of the one thing as the one thing. So this force is a separating force. It's a divisive force. It's a force that evolved into individual cells, groupings of organs and different bodies. So that it could have an experience within its own creation. It's not separate in any way from that ultimate power. It is not an adversary. It's just the something within the vast, enlivened nothing. And you experience both forces fully. You don't always understand what you're seeing. But it's kind of like when an artist is trying to create light with paint. You know, it's amazing how you can actually, without adding any extra light, through painting you can have light shining through darkness, and it's bright. And you do that with white or different shades that are close to that. And so the light shines through where you leave holes in the structure. Your life is similar. You know, there are areas where things open up their restriction into a little more freedom, and the experience that you have, the elated experience, I don't mean the emotional upswing. I just mean that moment where, my God, I can breathe again. That's the white space where that divisive force has left an opening so that you can feel that backdrop of power in which everything is structuring. That's the freedom. But again, without restriction, that freedom doesn't have much meaning. If you've never been restricted, it doesn't mean anything that you're free. And so there's this conscious restricting force. We've talked about it before in terms of stories. We've talked about it in terms of filters. Any conversation you could possibly have about life is a conversation about that conscious restricting force. And because it's conscious, it's an interactive force. You can speak to it, and it responds. You can open doorways where there was just a blocked wall. In some circles, this is magic. In other circles, this is prayer. In yet other circles, this is manifestation. But again, it's conscious. And so it knows the beginning, middle, and end of every blade of grass on this planet, every hair on your head. It knows it all at once. It sees its creation in dimensions that you can't even imagine because of your limitation to your five senses. When you are truly on your path spiritually and you are always up against the wall, right? When you are always trying to expand further, just giving in further to that reach, you come to understand that limiting force. There are decisions it makes that are not as simple as just your direction. It protects you from different things. It pushes you into difficult situations for your growth. It'll keep you from expanding too far before you're ready. And then one day it just opens up. But when you're always pushing up against that wall to expand, you're aware the day it opens. Because you were touching it when it happened. Really, it's this restrictive force that determines the spiritual path. And while everybody's heading to the same destinations, which is nowhere but consciously, the road is different for everyone. The structures that block us are different, one person to another. That blocking creates arenas of learning that are unique to you, exactly what you need, that prepare you perfectly for your next step. And so, your spiritual trek is something that is just always further, always further, always further. Every step you take, it gets bigger. And so there's further to go. Even when you reach something you might call enlightenment, you continue to grow, to open up into that awakening. And what you were before looks dim by comparison. But this is the path. Finding the stillness so that you have some sanity and some time outside the story. And then, within the storyline of life, giving yourself over to your own expansion. Going where you're afraid to go. All the little signals that you've been given of, here are the boundaries of what you can do. You walk up to those walls and you just start feeling your way through them. And you get blocked, but you don't shut down. You just keep going. The experience is one of willingness, not willpower. Not willpower where you're pushing through, but willingness where you're actually willing to just knock on the door and listen for the answers. To make the request the way a flower requests sunlight. You know, there are no words, it's just an openness and a direction that you face. And life just responds to it. And from that, you're able to grow. Eventually, what you come to see is that the structure itself, which looked so complete, was actually just a thin outline of things that you just put a lot of faith in. That the majority of what's around you is freedom, abundance.
Right.
The majority of what's around you is everything you think you're looking for. And the rest is just little suggestions to try and distract your mind. You come to realize that your personality is actually the same thing. Just kind of a thin structure of little suggestions that you've just hard focused on for so long and built stories around, so that you've got these kind of just cat's eye weavings of thick stories. None of it real. Just loosely agreed upon delusions, one person to another. You'll go through phases where that's really obvious, where you can just see everything all at once, and all there is freedom. And then the restricting force will come back in and give you work to do within a restricted context. You might not even really get to see the white spot, the sky behind the clouds for a while. But because you saw it, you know what's on the other side, and so it's okay. And you just become okay with that process. Things open and then they close. They open and then they close. And I don't think that ever stops. I've never had a teacher that I didn't see get caught up in things. I've had a bunch of teachers. What changes is that even while you're caught up, you know that it's not the ultimate truth of things. And so you only get caught up in things for a good reason. It's tricky because everything you get caught up in sets cycles in motion. And so a lot of times you've learned what you need to learn, but the cycle hasn't completed. I'm in that spot with a few things right now. But you meditate every day so that you don't lose sight of what's on the other side of those clouds. You meditate every day because you know how easy it is to get lost in the story, and you don't want to look up 3 years from now and realize you got to get back to what's real. There's no escaping participating in this process. The limiting force is going to limit, and I think just to understand that it's limiting for a reason. It actually has your best interests at heart, but its vision is very long. Lifetimes. So it won't always look like that. It might kill you off in this life even. But it's not nefarious. It's preparing you for some next step. So you show up and you participate. And you still yourself so that you can get little breaks from it and remember what's on the other side of it. And the more you do that, it all starts to work together. All right, let's see. Joanna has written something. I heard from a friend today the term belief reversals instead of limiting beliefs. I liked that because it is limitless. And the term limiting belief kind of limits us. Just wanted to share. Belief reversals versus limiting beliefs. I'm not sure I have anything to say on that, Joanna. I think there's a level of spiritual life where you are playing around with your belief systems, right? Where you are looking for limitations in that very specific way, and there's value to that, where you are coming to understand how your beliefs are creating the barriers in your life. But in pop spirituality, people really do like to give so much agency to the individual's ego. You know, there's this sense of, oh, well, this is just happening because I believe it's going to happen, and I'll just stop believing it's going to happen, and then it stops happening. Sure, yes. But good luck with that. You know, I mean, you came into life stamped with most of your wants already in place. They were seeds, but you didn't decide what most of those wants were. They were already there. And you like to feel like you have all this control over what you do, but you're going to do based on your wants. And if you trace those things back, it's kind of like if someone, it's like when people think I just like that I made some choice at some point in my life to be a gay man. That choice never happened any more than you chose to be straight, you know, or anybody chooses anything like that. It's something only a non-gay person would say, right? That's true of all of your kind of inner drives, those things that kind of make you you. So at some point, constantly pushing against them, I do think is something that you need to let go of. There's more of an all-encompassing realization when you come to understand that the limiting force in life has its own consciousness. A consciousness that is not separate from you, but is not your individual separated ego. And so you can interact and you can move things in certain directions. It's not like you have no agency, but most of the directions that you're going to want to move it in, you didn't decide. So it comes down to free will. Most people still believe in free will. I don't. And that doesn't mean I believe in predestination, but I do not, when I look at people and what moves them and what motivates them, I don't see a lot of free will. I see most of us playing around in this structure that is responsive to us, but not ultimately determined by us. And the spiritual road is the road that helps us realize that. And inch by inch, gain permission for pieces of it to lift. That's why every spiritual path you've ever heard of talks about divine grace in some shape or form. There's only so much you can do. And it's not nothing, but it's only so much. At some point, you need that force to meet you halfway. And what I'm trying to say is that begins to happen more and more. The kind of key to make that happen is that willingness to actually walk up to the edge of your boundaries and just kind of call out through your openness and your willingness to expand, your willingness to be uncomfortable, just like a flower makes itself open to the sun. Willingness, reach to the sun for whatever the sun has to offer it. So it's a different level we're talking about here than a conversation about limiting belief systems, which is not an invalid level, just it's not the same. I think a conversation like that goes better into a book than what we're talking about. What we're talking about, you almost have to catch it like a feeling from someone expressing it to you from that place. It's like an initiation. Of course. Are there any questions about any of that? I think it's probably one of those things that just has to go in and sort of tick away like a time bomb in you. You probably will have a hard time remembering pieces of it, and then at some point it'll come to a moment of ripening. Maybe you won't even know me anymore, but suddenly you'll just have this memory of this. All right, why don't we step into a place of willingness together? Attention at the forehead and crown. How open can you be? How relaxed, released, and open can you be right now? Nothing to hide. Nothing to control. And rather than disappearing into the nothing space, become aware of the structure of the room you're in. From the meditative state, become aware of the structure. And just be open in that space. Just like a flower reaching for the sun. Just let yourself shine. Shine in this space. Now take a story structure from your life. Something that feels tighter to you. Something that makes you feel a little bound. That has places that you don't want to go within it. From this space, I wonder if you can see that that is also a structure. Maybe something at work. Maybe your marriage. Maybe a friendship. Something less safe. And I want you to understand that that structure in front of you is conscious. You can speak with it, but really, it responds better to feeling and symbol. Walk up to one of the more painful walls of that structure. One of the places that really limits where you can go. And stand before it with the same reach of a flower reaching for the sun. See what wisdom descends upon you. That's how that energy speaks, by the way. Just open and willing. And stay that way. Until your understanding of the structure rearranges into something you can move through safely. for these kinds of realizations to complete themselves, they have to be grounded in the physical world. So I want you to ask yourself, what is the do of this realization? If I were to live this out and free up this physical part of my life, what would I do? How would I behave differently? What would I remind myself of as I walk through it? Really bring it down the mountain. What will I not do that I've been doing automatically? And if you haven't had the fundamental shift, then your job is to stay open like a flower, reaching for the sun until it happens. It might take several sessions for someone. This week, if you were able to figure out what the do of this is, I want you to take some action on it. If you're scared, do it and be scared. Don't put yourself in any physical, unsafe situation, obviously. But take this moment of power and ground it in your physical life through action. Have that experience. Are there any questions about that? This is one of those things that's going to evaporate. It's in there. But you probably won't be able to tell me in a couple of weeks what we talked about.
Huh.
So when we're done here, I want you to write down what that action is, and I want you to take it so that the complete teaching is in there. All right, everybody. I'm going to let you go do that, and I will see you next Thursday. Have a great week.
You too.
Thanks.
Thank you.